Hi, Facebook followers. We're here today with Dale Glick, our historian, and we are currently painting plaques today, but while we're waiting for a coat to dry, we thought we'd talk to him about a few interesting topics. Dale is very knowledgeable when it comes to the cemeteries in town, and Old City Cemetery is our oldest cemetery. And Dale, why don't you tell us a little bit about Old City Cemetery that might be interesting to folks that are tuning in here?
There's a map when they did a survey of Galena that's documented that it was laid out in 1826, and they didn't have a regular sexton, a person that was supposed to bury people there, till 1842. So we're guessing, that you'd hire somebody to go up there and dig a grave, and you'd bury them. But the first few years, from 26 to 42, it was under control of the county commissioners. It wasn't the political system we have now. In 1842, the city of Galena was established. It's when they first had elections and first had a mayor, and then they hired a sexton. So that was a little interesting. And then he got $3 from everybody if he dug a grave. It was listed in the ordinances that you couldn't charge anymore.
Okay, so if somebody were to pass, they would go somewhere and buy a coffin, like there were coffin makers, I'm guessing, in town?
Some of those records will show up in the probate records, which are at the courthouse, and you'll have an old receipt that Joe so-and-so paid Mr. Tate $3 for a wooden coffin.
Okay.
And then they'd go up the hills, or wherever they lived. You'd have to go up the hill because the cemetery's at the highest point in Galena, and the grave would have been dug. The probate records might show that they had a coffin, so the coffin was put in a pine box, which I didn't know, and then they had dug a grave 6 feet deep, and usually they were buried that day or the next day.
Okay.
They didn't have embalming.
Okay.
That early.
All right. Okay. And so, I've heard stories about the bodies were moved or they were like exactly what was going on, what was going on over there.
There were people in the paper that said came back, an article that they had heard that a family came back and dug up some graves. They didn't get the names and took them to where they're living today. So there's a few of those. The cemetery closed in 1857. They had been buying land up at Greenwood, which is the new cemetery up on Gear Street, a few years before that in anticipation of running out of room. Parents that were still living here, they did remove their kids and put them up in Greenwood.
Oh.
And any headstone that has a date older than 1857 has to be from Old City Cemetery. And then there's records, some documentation, people from St. Louis. William Hempstead's wife was from St. Louis. She died. She was first buried in Old City Cemetery, but she wanted to be buried at, I can't think of the one in St. Louis at the moment, a big cemetery. Mm-hmm. So when he died, he had her move back there, Bellefontaine. And then there's one record that shows up from here, Galena, to out in Maryland, and it's in the probate records because that's where they were from.
Okay.
So there were people that were reinterred in either Greenwood or other places, and that's not uncommon. It's just not a wholesale thing. But, the parents are still living.
Right.
If they had a wife.
Right.
Judge Seal, who we did a plaque for up on Prospect and Green Street.
Right.
His wife was buried at Old City, and when Greenwood opened, he had her moved up to Greenwood.
Okay. Was there always that wrought iron fence at Old City? Was that a fairly...
No, they had a wooden fence where you couldn't see into the cemetery.
Oh, really?
And in the papers, they said they had turnstiles for like a gate.
Really?
But there are some historic pictures. The wooden fence fell down once. They rebuilt it, but it's like an 8-inch wide plank about 6 feet high. So you literally couldn't see in there. There's periods where there were no fence, because the newspaper had articles where the cows were roaming into the cemetery because it's free grass.
Oh my gosh.
There's articles in the cemetery where people were throwing their ashes from their houses and garbage into the cemetery.
Oh.
Because you didn't have garbage collection. So instead of putting it in your yard, you'd go across the cemetery.
Well, now we're getting into a whole nother, like, no garbage collection. That might have to be our next topic of conversation. Interesting.
A lot of our early settlers are buried in Old City, but we don't know where. There are no written records except for one short 3-year period. The original is lost. It was transcribed in the 1970s by Alice Barthel. But other than that, if there's not a headstone, we don't know where the first 2 priests of St. Michael's are buried up there. We believe it's on the northeast corner, but where in there we don't know. Amos Farrar is buried up there.
Oh, that is, as of right now, that's our oldest plaqued house, 1824.
Margaret Ledley, who we just did a plaque, is interesting. She has a tall headstone. It's lying on the ground. I believe it's thin, about 2 inches, like 2 inches by 6 feet.
Really?
Her base that it was stuck in, they didn't use mortar, they used molten lead. And it's up there today where they poured hot lead to mortar that stone into a base.
No kidding.
H.H. Gear is buried up there.
He's the one with the tall monolithic headstone. Yes.
Moses Meeker, who's I consider the founder of Galena, because in 1823 he came from Cincinnati down the Ohio up the Mississippi in a flatboat with 60 people. So he came here actually to settle, not just to come here and mine, try to make it rich, and then head back to your home place. Moses Meeker's buried there.
Did Moses Meeker have his first home on what is Meeker Street, or was that just named after him?
It was where Whittam Row is today. So Whittam Row wasn't there. He had a farmhouse that shows up in a deed. So it was on the Meeker and Broadway.
Okay.
Then he ran into argument or disagreement with the second lead agent or the first lead agent, so he sold everything out and went to Wisconsin.
Wow. And were there any Meekers left behind, or did the Meeker family all go to Wisconsin?
No, they went to Wisconsin. The last was up around Janesville. I think there's probably still descendants up there. We still have 4th and 5th generation descendants visiting Old City Cemetery. There's Gear descendants, Gratiot or Gratiot. They live in Madison. There's other areas in the country. We've had people from Washington that have come back for their 4th or 5th generation. The other names I can't think of at the moment.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dale. We will be recording more interesting topics. Thanks a lot, Dale. We'll talk to you soon.